Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, September 6, 2017. This is a Town of Speedway Board of Zoning Appeals hearing. I am Mike Simonson, Chairman of the Board. Board members in attendance tonight are Mike Allen, our Vice Chairman, Tyler Carmichael, our Secretary, and Janet Fullen, a Board member. Also in attendance is Michelle Leidy, our Recording Secretary. Representing the Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development Planning Division is Ms. Kathleen Blackham. Have all who wish to speak been sworn in?
I believe they have.
Thank you. Would all please mute or turn off any cell phones at this time? Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our previous meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I get a motion that they be approved with some minor clerical corrections.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Rules for those who wish to speak at tonight's hearing. The petitioner, remonstrator, or proponent will each have 15 minutes to present their evidence. We will then hear from Ms. Blackham, the City of Indianapolis, with the staff report. After her presentation, there will be a 5-minute rebuttal period for the petitioner, remonstrator, or proponents. Our first petition tonight is a continued variance from last month's hearing. It is 2017 DVS 004, 5621 Meadowwood Drive. Would the petitioner or their representative please step to the podium and give us your name and address, please?
Brian White, 5621 Meadowwood Drive.
Thank you.
I know there were some questions last meeting about the build line. So we had contacted John Merritt to get a better understanding that for everybody, and was informed that it's 30 feet from the sidewalk, which is the house side, to the back of the house is 30 feet. So basically, right now my house is sitting on the build line.
Okay.
So the variance that I'm requesting will be needed based on the build line. But based on the recommendation from the city and our last meeting, I would like to modify that proposal and hope it's an agreement for everybody. My proposal is to move it from the build line out 12 feet instead of the 16 feet, so we're shortening it by 4 feet. And we also will reduce the fence height from 6 feet down to 5 feet. By doing both of those, it'll there'll be less canonization, which I know the city was having an issue with, but it'll also give us some of the privacy that we would request, and also the 5-foot fence will allow us to put a pool in the backyard. And so that is our.
Would the fence material still be the proposed privacy fence? Or would there be any other materials to be considered?
Right now, we're considering the privacy fence because it's on the street. And that way, when my daughter and her friends are out there swimming, it gives them the privacy. It's not the 6 foot we want, but it's the 5 foot, which you're driving by, you're not going to be able to see over the house or over the fence, driving by. The only way you're going to be able to is if you're walking up and down the street.
Where in the yard were you thinking of putting the pool? Have an idea of where it's going to go?
As far as away from the street.
Well, is it going to be center of the yard, towards the eastern edge of your yard?
Towards the eastern edge as much as we can.
So,
Based on, because there's a power line that runs on that corner, so, a little bit farther out from the power line, because we don't want that dropping.
So you could put a screen fence inside the backyard near the pool to create more of a privacy for the pool area for your daughter and her friends when they're swimming, that would not require you to put a fence out into the front yard on Maplewood.
Yes, that's possible. I mean, we could, like a lattice or
But just something that would offer the screening, which you wouldn't require that tall fence on the Maplewood side of your yard, out beyond the build line.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, yeah.
Okay.
But that doesn't help us, expand our backyard, which is one of the reasons we wanted to go out to 12 feet, We want the 16, but, we understand, the canonization. I mean, we're only going out 12 feet. I mean, they're still 16 feet from the sidewalk. I don't think it's going to feel like it's closed in. I know there's other properties in Speedway that have the fence right on I know they're not supposed to have that, but they have that. I mean, they went around it. We're trying to do the right thing and present this, go through all the right channels.
Would you be open to going less than 12 feet?
As in, what, 10 feet? I mean,
Like-
what do we,
8 feet, one fence section?
if that's the best I'm going to get, then I will say yes. I mean, I'd prefer the 12 feet. I mean, I don't see a big difference between 8 and 4. I mean, 8 and 12. But I mean, if the 8 feet allows us to get the fence built, give us the privacy, so we're not adding additional fence in the backyard as a screen. Are you talking 5 foot or 6 foot or?
It would be no higher than 5 feet,
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's,
and understanding that you need a 5-foot fence for the potential pool.
right.
So, any other questions for the petitioner?
I appreciate your patience through this whole process. It's been challenging.
That's all right. No, thank you.
Are there any remonstrators or proponents who wish to speak? Seeing none. Ms. Blackham, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman, excuse me, Simonson, members of the board. As you will note from, and the petitioner has indicated that staff is recommending denial because the fence, even though they're decreasing it down from 6 to 5, it is still higher than what is permitted by the ordinance. And again, last month, I believe I explained that there are 2 front yards on this property, which in some ways it does create difficulty, but staff believes that if that fence was brought in line with and I guess that would be the build line that the petitioner spoke about, and headed south, that then there wouldn't be a variance needed. And again, the reason for this is staff doesn't see practical difficulty in the use of the property, and in order to grant variances, that is a requirement under the Indiana Code. And again, appreciate the fact that the petitioner is willing to negotiate and coordinate on this and decrease the height of that. That's better, but again, it's still higher than what is permitted in the front yard. And again, the location staff would prefer to see that it be pulled back, and even with that build line on that west side. And we'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
So staff wouldn't view the fact that it's a corner lot to be a practical difficulty?
No. Mm-mm.
I have no questions.
None here.
Thank you. Petitioner have anything else they'd like to add?
I mean, it's not a difficulty using the lot, or the back, it is a difficulty because the backyard is now basically cut in half. We're losing that, that side of the street, so we can't use it. The dogs can't play, my daughter can't play. So, it is a difficulty on using that part of the yard. So, I mean, that's, and I don't think, only coming out 12 feet is going to canonize that street at all. I mean, there's only like 3 or 4 houses, there's not a lot of traffic. You still have, like 18 feet to the fence from the sidewalk, so you're not closed in. That's all I got.
Motion for a vote?
Are we voting on 12 feet or 8 feet?
The motion would be for
the
no more
12.
than 8-foot projection into the Maplewood yard and a 5-foot high fence on that section. Any motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
So just to be clear, we're voting on the fence projecting no more than 8 feet to the west of the corner of the house and being no higher than 5 feet tall.
Petition 2017 DVS 004 is approved 4-0.
Thank you, Mr. White. Our next variance is also a continued variance from our previous hearing. It's 2017 UBS 004, 4918 West 14th Street, Huff Properties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The property at 4918 West 14th Street. Well, let me start over here real quick. Let me just tell you why we had the continuance last time, because it's of importance. We had several things you have to go by to get the petition notice. When we went to file the affidavit, it appeared that it also included neighborhood associations and council people. The list that I was provided by DMV, Department of Metropolitan Development, didn't include that. It had only homeowners. So when I caught that error, it was too late to remail, and so I wouldn't sign the affidavit because the mailing list was not correct. Therefore, then we had, by your guys' approval, a continuance of this matter, and that's why we're here today. The property at 4918 West 14th Street is a house property that was bought by the town of Speedway, and they tore down the house. The land is currently vacant, no improvements on it whatsoever. And back in May, I believe, my clients, Huff Properties, purchased the land from Speedway. Speedway, as part of the conditions, the town of Speedway, asked that my client make that a parking lot. We're able to use that parking lot 12 days during the year for their use. The rest of the time, the parking lot is available to anyone else in the community that can use it. And as you know, on Main Street, parking sometimes becomes a little bit of a problem. So this is, even though it's my my client's property, it's really the town's parking lot except for 12 days of the year. As I just said, this is a vacant property. There's no use for it other than to be vacant if we can't use it for a parking lot. My client's not going to build a house on it even though it's residential. And if you're familiar with that area, there's street parking on 14th Street, there's street parking on 15th and on Main. But additionally, on the west side of 14th Street, where the commercial properties are, there's also parking there that abuts the alley. And so all this was an additional parking lot that also abuts the alley. Currently, I mean, if you look at the property, it's kind of an eyesore. There's nothing there except for, I don't even think it's grass growing. It might be more like weeds. And so my client and I believe the town of Speedway wanting to make it a parking lot is going to improve that area. It's going to be a lot nicer to look at. It's going to help the community by having additional parking we don't have now. It should relieve some of the parking on the neighborhood streets as well. In addition to that, the strict application of our zoning would prevent it from really being used for anything else. And so this is a proper and good use to improve that property that's vacant right now. And we think the board should, approve this variance because there's really no other use for that property. And so with that, I'm going to also ask then the board if they would consider a 2-day waiver of the notice. When we got, I think the board here gave us a variance, an extension, a continuance on September the 8th. We picked up the material from Department of Metropolitan Development on August the 14th. I believe we put the sign and the mailings all on the 15th, which is 23 days. But when discussing it with my client, what day was it? Well, we're not sure. It could have been either the 15th or the 17th. It was either a Tuesday or a Thursday. And so while I believe it's on the 15th, we think having the waiver, it makes it clear. And this is not the only notice they've gotten on this property. The hearing that was scheduled for August the 8th, or whatever the date was in August, they'd had previous notice before then. And so we provided notice twice by mail and now with the sign and 2 newspaper ads. We don't think that's much of a burden since there was previous notice on it. And we can't say for certainty that it wasn't done on the 15th. I just am apprehensive myself about saying it when one of the 3 of us think it could have been on the 17th. So with that, I'll answer any questions. Oh, and let me just add this. In the staff's recommendations, we agree with the recommendations. We have no problem with leaving the tree there and doing the other things that we're going to do, including changing the landscaping. The only thing that we would ask is that leaving the tree there, we know we may lose a parking space or 2, and I think the staff's report says 2. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay with the board, we have to submit another drawing to the administrator for their approval before we can do it, is if we can get 12, we'd like to have 12. If we can't, we'll go with the 11. But since they recommended losing 2 spaces, I'd like to make sure with the person that draws this up that maybe we can do it with 11, as long as the administrator approves it. Other than that, we're fine with all the other recommendations.
Can you explain more about the landscaping that's going to go around the parking lot? What we're looking at, what we're going to have in place to help screen it from the residents to the west?
Yeah, I would like to do that. I think the staff will do a better job of it since that's their suggestion, and we're fine with their suggestion. What they call for is year-round screening. So instead of perennial plants, it'd probably be more like evergreens or something like that, which my client is fine with doing.
Is there any plan for a fence or anything of that nature?
Yeah,
or is it-
in the original plan, we do have a fence that our client will be putting up between the parking lot west to the first residential home.
Okay. And what about the grade change? It looks like there's quite a bit of elevation currently with the lot that's there than the alley level. Is the parking lot going to step up to that, or are you going to reduce the level down to the alley?
Well, I think that's going to be up to the contractor if they can do it without having to cut it down. I mean, that's the way it is currently. If they can't, we'll have to do what they say, but I don't think it was in our plans to have to cut down any more than what we have already. That's the current elevation that's been there ever since the neighborhood's been there.
It looks like on the street end, it's significantly different height than it is back where the 2 alleys intersect. That would be a
Yeah, I can't-
rather unusual transition between the alley and the parking area?
Well, to answer that question, since I'm not an engineer in this, if the contractor believes that that can't be done, we're not going to have him do something that can't be done. So if it's recommendation in the new drawing that we have to submit to the administrator for their approval, he indicates to us that you have to cut that down for the cars to go up and out, we're going to do that.
Okay.
We're not going to do anything that's going to make it difficult. The whole idea behind this is to give the neighborhood something that's easy to use and relieve the parking. So if it doesn't do that, it wouldn't be much worth buying the land and repaving it if we can't really use it for what we wanted to do.
Is the height on the fence specified in this? Is that an 8-foot fence?
No, it's not, actually. I don't believe, let me look at the drawing.
Let's see. It just says decorative privacy fence to match.
Yeah, it doesn't have a height on it. 6? Okay, well, I think they said 6.
Okay. Have there been any drainage studies done to find out what impact the additional asphalt will have for drainage in the area, or water flow?
Yeah, not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for them?
I have none for, nope.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
You're welcome, sir.
We have any remonstrators or proponents who'd like to speak at this time? Please step up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
If you would raise your right hands, repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Evan Chair,
Swear and affirm,
swear and affirm
under penalty of perjury, that my testimony will be true.
Evan Chair, the address is 4920 West 14th Street. So I live in the property that will be butting up to this new parking lot. And we have no problem them putting in a parking lot. I just kind of want to put that out there. The only thing that we want to know is, one, which way are the parking lots or the cars going to be facing due to headlights and stuff at night. Two, for the two main things is, where is, right now, my yard and that yard are level. And one of the biggest thing is we got to have some type of barrier, a retaining wall or something, because if for some reason somebody gets in their car and it's pointed towards the house and they think they're in reverse but they're in drive, they're going right straight through a bedroom of ours. And it's a dangerous thing. It doesn't have to be like, the Great Wall or anything like that, but something where if somebody pulled in too far, they don't just have a picket fence to stop them from going into my house. They have some type of...
You consider the concrete parking stops that are in a lot of other parking lots near buildings to prevent vehicles from pulling too far into a space sufficient, or would you like to see something?
If we could get, I know when there's a elevation change like that, if they dig it out and they make it level with the other parking lot, if they could put like maybe a concrete wall or something where a car, a truck, nothing is going to get past it. Because I have a bedroom, right? Like that's what they'll hit. If it was my garage or something, I'd probably be a little bit more lenient. I need to know that if somebody, during the race time, during times, midnight, people are having fun. I'm not saying anything's going to go wrong, but if, people make mistakes. Somebody makes a mistake, again, thinks they're in reverse or doesn't put it in park, and a big truck takes that picket fence out, something's going to stop them. They're not going to go into my bedroom. And the other thing is where drainage would go, just making sure that it doesn't all funnel into my yard.
Well, I
And
think they
drain.
would
As long as
slope
we
it
have-
to the alley, and then
Yeah.
alley would drain as it normally would to the street.
And again, if they dig it out, I don't see that necessarily being a problem. Just 2-3 foot elevation difference where it's just a concrete wall, and, you know, you step up, fence can go on top or bottom, doesn't really matter. But if, like I said, if somebody isn't thinking, they're gonna hit that concrete wall, and it's gonna stop them dead in their tracks, instead of my house stopping them.
Are you opposed to sharing a fence if they were to extend the existing fence to the south?
Yeah.
Along your house?
Yeah, that's not a
Okay.
problem. I got a dog, so I'm wanting a fence on that side anyway, so.
But once it passes the house, though, we'll have to step down from the 6 foot to the 42-inch maximum height.
Okay, passes where
Once
now?
it, from the front of your house towards 14th Street, it can't be 6 feet tall.
Okay. I have
It's gotta
a,
stay.
I have a chain fence there anyway, so whatever they want to do. As long
If
as
they
the
were to
backyard
replace
has
the chain fence with a shorter, similar fence, so we have continuity and fencing along that area, we don't have a patchwork of fences
That's
going up.
perfect. Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to make it more expensive or harder on anybody with the wall. Just, it doesn't have to be a concrete wall. I've seen, you know, I don't know what's cheaper, but I see them put boulders in there, decent sized boulders. Something that, you know,
Your main
I'm not worried
concern, though,
about-
is along the house frontage, not back by the garage or the alley.
it steps down to the alley, so I'm assuming if they were to level it out, that the alley, I mean, it would be flat, just where the house is, my backyard, to protect my house, basically, and my backyard.
Okay, so from the garage south, then?
Yeah.
The south face of the garage, all the way out?
Yep,
Okay,
that's fine.
all right.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anyone else here to speak for or against the petition?
Charles Bennett, 4934 West 15th Street. Here to speak against the parking lot, but as I was stated numerous times over the past 12 years, I'm all for redevelopment. What I'm not for, and I may have created this word, is de-development and destruction of the historical structures and a historical neighborhood. I've been before this board numerous times and other boards to express my opinion, but I've tried to give evidence time and time again why parking lots going in neighborhoods are not conducive to development or maintaining the fabric of the neighborhood. But tonight, I just limit my concerns to three. Not having known anybody else was going to say anything about safety, that was my first concern. When I was here back in April talking about the hotel going in and the traffic that would be increased in my neighborhood, same thing goes for parking lots. Never even thought about a car pulling into a house. Now the parking lots are going to encroach or may encroach into the neighborhood. But I think safety is a big issue. And I know that this board's concerned with safety because I think you had an issue about a month ago or 2 months ago in May where safety was a main concern for not okaying a variance. Second, I always look at the staff reports, and I'm always amazed at how in the critical area 15, they'll use that for their support sometimes, but the thing they always leave out is that in this Wayne Township plan, they're supposed to restrict strictly commercial village mixed use land uses to the existing boundary formed by the alley and Lloyd Street just west of Main Street. That's been in there, I think, since 2006 when the Wayne Township plan came out. We didn't follow it, obviously, with the granting of the variance at Big Woods. I hope tonight we follow that, but we always seem to leave that out of the staff report. I mean, it's in there, but we don't ever mention that that's one of the main tenets of it. I'd also agree strongly in the staff report that it would be unlikely that a new dwelling unit would be constructed on this property, or to say that, hey, there's nothing else that's going to go in there, so let's put a parking lot in. I think this town has shown a great use of its resources in the past in rehabbing 3 different houses in this town where they turned around and resold them, so the assessed value stayed up. I know that Habitat for Humanity's used lots in this town that were vacant to put houses up. There's been great partnerships, so I don't know why that wouldn't have happened again, but I guess that could have been a better use, but I know the town did lose about $78,000 on this property, so maybe putting a parking lot in to get those spaces might be valuable. I also have a problem, well, I'm glad that staff said they would not approve any further commercial encroachment into the residential area, But I think they said that the last time Bigwoods tried to get more parking, and we went ahead and went on with that. So we've got that. And then my last thing is, every time it seems like we grant a variance, I always wonder who's going to come in and check up on the variances that are supposed to go into place. And I go all the way back to 2010, when there was a temporary variance that was put into place, and they said the variance shall expire April 30th, 2011, at which time the sites shall be returned to their prior condition, at minimum planted with grass. That was never done. There was the August 5th, 2015 UVS 001 case with Bigwoods, in which they didn't complete their end of the variances, and I think it caused staff to say staff was disappointed landscaping requirements were not met on the parking lot variance. So I just wonder who checks up on that, how those variances are going to be followed through, if we'll know it gets done. I'm sure in this case, if it's going to be paved or they're going to put a brick wall in or whatever, or a wall, we'll know that. But I'm just starting to think that people who are receiving the variances really don't give much credence to the authority of the board or even the town or what's going on. And then I'll just close with this. And I made this point several times before, but I'm not even sure why we have the SZ1 zoning. I know at the time when it came out, it was going to be great, received high acclaim from the Urban Land Institute. It was going to be a way that we could control development without encroaching the neighborhood. But it seems like every time that something comes up, there's always a variance to it. And again, I'm still concerned with this encroaching in the neighborhood, but I do appreciate the time to speak. And I'd also reemphasize, I'm not against any of the redevelopment or against any of the businesses. It's just what we're doing with coming into the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Maureen Baskerville, 4930 West 15th. I also oppose taking residential lots and converting them into parking lots because the precedent keeps getting set, and it just, every time is going to be the last time, but it seems like there's always another. And this affects my property value and the amount of traffic around. I'm not sure that the business about the residents in the area using this lot is a really valid point, because the bottom line is all the employees for the restaurants on Main Street park over by my house. I can't park in front of my own house. So, maybe the restaurant employees will all go park over there, but I can't see the residents are going to get much use out of it. So anyway, I just, I think these things are kind of a quality of life issue for the residents. I think we kind of get the short end of the stick on a regular basis. But that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Connie Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Speedway Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the parking lot. I think as a representative of many of the businesses.
You have an
and-
address, Connie?
I'm sorry. What?
Can we have your
Oh,
address,
5750, oh, no, wait, I moved. I don't know my address. 4923 West, I don't know. I just moved.
please?
It's 29th Street, West 29th Street, sorry. I don't know I don't know my new address. I was
Do you know the chamber's
5751.
address?
Yes, 4914 West 16th.
Thank you.
It's just moved. Sorry, now I look like I shouldn't be talking. I'm here to just on behalf of small businesses. I mean, the chamber is really in place to help small businesses thrive. We are very pleased with redevelopment, and I think with the new development going on the Wilshire project, parking is going to be even more important. And I think parking has to be close and accessible, and I think that lot will be perfect. And the building is already torn down. And I look at it as a benefit for a lot of people that live in Speedway, because I know that the traffic on Main Street does flow into the neighborhoods. I hope this would help alleviate some of that, but a lot of us in Speedway don't live in that neighborhood, and we don't have anywhere, this will give us a place to park when we visit Main Street businesses, and I just think parking's going to be an issue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak for or against the petition at this time? Okay.
I'm Ron Fisher, 2518 North Lyndhurst. I was on the Redevelopment Commission for 12 years. I was a founding member of it. This parking lot came up at our redevelopment several times. But I just want to give you some history. Speedway Christian, I was on the board when we tore down 2 houses and build a parking lot for Speedway Christian Church. I think one of the speakers tonight is quite active in that church. The Methodist Church tore down a house to build a bigger parking lot. Conkle's Funeral Home tore down a house to build a bigger parking lot. AFMB, or Bank One, or whatever it's called today, tore down a house to make a bigger parking lot. This is not something new, and that's all in the Speedway whole neighborhood. And I think it'll be an asset. We need the parking. Every parking spot counts over there. And so this will be an asset. If it's done right, the way that we've been told, I think it'll be an asset for the community. So I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Any other remonstrators or proponents? Seeing none, we'll hear from Ms. Blackham.
Again, good evening, Chairperson Simonson, members of the board. Staff is recommending approval of this request, and the Senator Young has already described what staff would like to see. And the reason staff would like to see those two southern spaces moved is that then it would bring landscape up to the front building line of that house, rather than pushing the parking south of that house. That was one reason. The other reason, of course, is that it's going to save a tree, and staff believes that trees should be protected because they do have a lot of benefits. I noticed in here that they call for a concrete curb, and and staff had asked for wheel stops, and I don't know if the combination of those two would satisfy the concern that the neighbor would have, and believe me, I can appreciate that. I had a truck go through my fence into my house about 1.5 years ago, so I can appreciate the concern of the neighbor, and I think it would be important to provide that additional level of safety for them. Staff would also like a little more information on what they call a decorative privacy fence. Usually decorative fences are those, you would see those black, to me, to staff, that would be those black decorative with the pickets going through it and the rails, but it doesn't create a privacy. It doesn't create privacy, so that staff would just like a little more detail on that. And again, in counting the spaces, there are 13 spaces plus that accessible parking space. So they would be losing approximately, well, it would be down to 12. But one of those spaces, of course, is going to be that additional space that's required for the ADA parking. But again, the reason for that, pulling it back, is to just minimize the impact on that neighbor there to the west. And again, staff is recommending approval of this, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
So on the drawing that they submitted, it shows the tree along 14th Street still in place with the proposed 13 spaces plus the one accessible.
But I don't know how accurate that plan is, and I think
Okay.
in order to protect the roots of that tree, because it's an older tree, those roots are going to be spread out, and in order to protect that tree during construction, staff would like to see that pulled back, and again, minimizing the impact on that neighbor to the west too, is pulling.
I guess some of that would depend also on how much they would potentially lower the grade of the site.
Right,
Because the tree looks like it's down closer to the sidewalk
Yes,
level, and the yards then slopes up from there.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's also on the southeast corner of the parking lot.
And not where they have it placed. So that's
Right.
why staff would like to make sure that there's going to be adequate space for that
Okay.
tree to remain healthy.
All right. And the separation fence, if it extends beyond the front building line of the existing house, it would have to step down to 42 inches?
42 inches, 3.5 feet. And I don't know, there's not been anything mentioned about the guardrail, I'm assuming that, obviously, that would be removed, and I don't know whether that, perhaps a guardrail along that western boundary would work. I don't know, that's just an idea that throwing out. But again, that needs to be landscaped to soften the impact of a parking lot. And it will, and the landscaping would obviously also help with the drainage.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Blackham?
I have none.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right. You have any rebuttal, Mr. Young?
Oh, I don't know if rebuttal necessarily, but just, we appreciate the remarks of the neighbors in Speedway. You got a great community here. I live over at 30th and High School Road myself, and my clients don't want to do anything that's going to harm a great community of Speedway. A couple of things. The grade was brought up by the chairman. I don't know if it can be changed or not, or what the engineers thought when they look at this, but if it does, it may interfere with that tree. I don't know. I'd like to find that answer out, whether we have, how much the grade has to come down. For the neighbor who lives directly west, what we're going to ask is if we can have the parking spaces face the commercial buildings instead of his home. That should take care of most of his concern about a car going through over through the house. We'll have him facing the other direction. We'll see if we can do that. Also, we've put in here, I think that's been brought up, we've recommended a concrete curb just for that purpose. I know the staff has, in their recommendations, was the concrete wheel stops. That's something we would consider too. We think the curb probably would accomplish the same goal. There would be no reason to have them both. But if that's the will of the board, I mean, we'll comply with that. So, again, the only issue here, I understand some of the concerns about tearing down the houses and making parking lots in the residential area. This is a little bit different, only because there's already parking on that alley. There's already parking there, and there is not going to be any difference here of having parking on the other side of the alley. There's already commercial property that has parking there. So, like I said earlier, we're more than happy to accept these recommendations. The privacy fence is a privacy fence. I guess we could get pictures of one and show it to the administrator to make sure that that's something that meets with their approval. But we're not looking for anything that you can see through. It would be where you can't see through. A privacy fence, you can't see through it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be private. But again, we're willing to do that, and we're willing to accept that nothing will be done before the administrator approves the plan. So with that, I just ask for your consideration. I'll take any questions.
I do have a question. If you do change the parking instead of facing west to facing east, there may not be enough room then to pull in and then pull directly into a parking space. Would angled parking be a better option? If that were the case, if we were to face the direction of the cars, make it angled parking?
Mr. Allen, I don't know,
Right.
first of all, if we can do it. Second, I'm just going to have to ask the engineer
Sure,
if they
certainly.
can do it. If they say that angled parking's better, we're going to do what, I mean, my client owns a business there. They want people to use it and be happy with it. If they can do it the other way, whichever way is a way it works, we'll do it that way. So, and I can't answer your question. I just don't know if angle would be better than.
I don't know what type of ingress egress the lot would use for parking going facing east. I
Well,
was looking at
if they're going
those.
to pull in and they're going to park west, they're going to come
But
in
you're
the same
saying
way.
parking facing to the east?
Yeah, when you pull in off the alley there,
You have to pull,
you're either going to turn right and park west, or if we can do it, you could turn left and park east.
you'd have to pull all the way into the parking lot in order to make a turn to the east, to align the cars up against the alley.
You would have to have a specific entrance and exit to make that work, as opposed to, it looks like,
Turning
currently,
in.
the way it is, it looks like they'll just turn in off the alley into any of the spaces. But if you face them east, that's why I say angle parking, if we
Well,
did that.
again, since I'm not an engineer, Mr. Allen, I can't say that would. But to me, just logically, if they can turn right into a parking space, I don't know why they can't have it designed to turn left.
Because
It's
you're
the
up
same
against the
size.
fence.
I'm sorry?
You're up against a wall. You can't just magically turn the car 180 degrees.
Well, it won't be against the wall if it's facing east. The wall would be to the west.
How do you get to the back side of the parking spot to turn in from the alley?
As you come in on the alley here?
Mhm.
The
If
same
you're
way
gonna
you're
turn to the
if you
right-
Turn west.
Well,
I guess what you're saying is you would put almost the concrete parking spots almost similar to where the barrier is right now, so that it would be deep enough so that you could pull in to that lot and almost have a two-way flow, almost a two-way flow of traffic there?
If it's possible.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting that because I
Right.
don't know if it's, and the only reason I'm suggesting it is we want to accommodate the neighbor. And
Sure.
if we can have the cars
Certainly.
park
Sure,
east,
absolutely.
we'd rather do that for him.
Sure.
If we can't do anything about it.
Right.
I'm just suggesting if we can do it, we'd like to do that for him.
if that's not a feasible option, and we're still going to end up with the plan that we're currently looking at,
Correct.
would there be an agreement to putting in some type of a retaining wall along that border and excavating the site such that you're going to need it to hold the wall, the earth up?
Well,
And that, in effect, that also helps lower the height of the headlights shining directly into the house as the cars pull in,
Yeah.
if you're lowering the
well, there would
grade.
be a privacy fence on that again that would block that light. I could be wrong. I don't think that is as much as an issue as if a car would jump that concrete curb. And there is going to be a concrete curb there, it would prevent the car from going over, but we would add, in addition, we don't have a problem with putting the concrete wheel stop there, and you'd have two. I don't know the idea of building how big the concrete wall and how much that would get into. First of all, my clients...
Wouldn't have to be a concrete wall, it could be stacked stone or something of that nature that is a more appealing
Or even the type of barriers they
View
have
to
at Charlie
our
Brown's.
appearance to the
Back up.
the area rather than a big chunk of concrete sitting there.
Well, there's going to be more in concrete. Obviously, it's going to be landscape.
Yeah.
But the most visible feature will be that wall as you pull in, because it's going to be at the edge of the parking area. And then the
Well-
landscape will be behind and/or above
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'm not sure, I may not be understanding, I don't know whether a concrete wall, what you envision, how tall. We know we got a concrete curb here, and I imagine a concrete curb maybe,
You know,
but I don't know what...
3 or 4 block-high stacked stone retaining wall.
Yeah,
That's high enough that a car is not going to jump it or go through it.
well,
If it hits it, it's
Yeah.
going to stop it.
okay. I know at Eagle Creek, I have the same concerns when I pull into their parking lot, the ones that's facing the reservoir, and all they got is a concrete wheel stop. And I keep thinking, one day I'm going to go over that. But if I did, if you had a concrete curb there, the likelihood is I'm not going to go over both and go through a house, and then go through the shrubbery and go through the fence. My client wants to do what the board feels is appropriate. I can't speak on it because I don't know the additional cost. The town of Speedway bought the property. The town of Speedway tore down the house, and my client, in helping the town of Speedway, purchased the property to add additional parking. If it was just going to be for them, we'd say, okay, we'll do all that, but it can only be used for our customers. This is used for the entire public. And so Mr. Chairman, you may have a great
That's
idea. I just don't know. I don't
Would
want
they
to
be
commit them
willing
that.
to accept that as a condition? That's the
I don't know if
question.
they can or not knowing the cost. That's the only problem. I mean, they want to do everything they can, not only for the safety of their good neighbor, but the people who may jump the curb. But I can't, and I don't think they're going to commit, because we don't have any idea what that's going to cost to build that. I just go back to thinking that we have a concrete curb, we're willing to put in the concrete wheel stops is the second thing, and we got the shrubbery that's got to be approved by the administrator, and I think it's more like evergreens. It's going to be a difficult job to get through all that to get to the house. But That's the only thing I can't commit to. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, we just don't know what the cost of that is.
Okay. On the separation fence, the privacy fence, were you planning on putting in an entire new fence along the property line?
Yeah, it's, at their cost, they're going to put a whole fence in there.
Okay. And the tree on 14th Street, we're going to do everything.
We're going to save it.
that
It's not,
tree.
we're going to do everything, it's going to be saved. The only thing we're asking is if we can squeeze out another parking spot. If we can't, they're not upset about that.
So right now, you're proposing a concrete curb
Right,
along the western border.
right.
If we requested that to be a 10 or 12-inch high curb, would that be
Well,
agreeable?
I'd
Because
say.
it's going to be
I don't
tall
know
enough
if
that
It's going to be that tall anyway. If you say 10 or 12.
I'm just trying to figure out what can be a high enough curb or abutment that's going
Yeah.
to truly restrict a car from jumping it. You know, I've
Well-
seen cars go over those concrete stops, I've seen them jump curbs onto sidewalks, you know, with little or no effort.
Yeah.
And just trying to
Well-
listen to the neighbors' concerns and trying to help that out and make it something that they're not going to lose sleep over at
Yeah.
night.
We
Can take care of this now, it doesn't become an issue down the road.
Yeah. Well, again, Mr. Chair, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. We just don't know how high you'd have to build it to prevent a car from jumping it. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how high it has to be to do that.
Would they commit to a 12-inch curb?
I think that'll be fine. We would go with a 12-inch curb. The only thing I would ask then is if they park that way, I don't think we have a problem with that, but if they park the other way, we don't want to have the wheel stops there. We probably want them on the other side.
Well, I don't know,
If they can park.
if they do that, they would have to have some kind of stop to prevent people from just turning in the wrong direction off the alley into those spots.
Well, I guess they could, Mr. Chairman, turn the wrong way, but the striping will show that the parking's over here. I guess somebody could decide, I don't care about the stripes, and I'm going to park the other way, but,
I'm saying if they were to essentially back into the spot, then their car would still be facing west and the headlights and whatnot would face
well, we're
west.
still going to have, no, you're right, somebody could do that, that part. That's why we're going to have the privacy fencing.
Okay.
I was just thinking of a way to cut down even more light exposure, and you're perfectly correct. Somebody could, matter of fact, I saw on the news the other day, the police actually recommend that you park in backwards so you can get out quicker if trouble comes up. So some people could do that.
And they could very well back in with the way the parking lot's proposed and the lights would not face
Yeah,
the houses
yeah,
anyway. so.
you're correct.
Okay. Right. Any other questions?
I have none.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
A motion for a vote?
I'd like to make a motion for a vote.
I'll second the motion.
Second motion, so the one condition that we've
It's a taller curb.
requested and they've agreed to is a 12-inch curb along the western boundary of the parking lot. And they agreed to replace the entire length of the separation fence between the house and the lot, and they're going to save the tree on 14th Street.
Correct. Petition 2017 UVS 004 is approved 4-0.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Welcome, thank you. Our next variance is 2017 DBS 005, 1002 to 1020 Main Street, Big Woods Restaurant.
Good evening. My name's Mike Sells. I'm with Cruz Consulting. We're a land planning, civil engineering, and surveying firm located at 7834 Business Center Drive in Avon. I'm before you this evening on behalf of Big Woods Brewery, and one of the partners, Jim Dunbar, is seated to my right. Similar to the previous petition, notices were not sent to the adjoining property owners, nor was signage posted pursuant to the rules of procedure. And it is my understanding that we have to ask for a waiver of that requirement, and that had to be made in writing a minimum of 7 days prior to the hearing. We forwarded that correspondence to Michelle August 21st, and the notices were sent to the adjoining property owners 21 days prior to the hearing, as opposed to the requirement of 23 days, and the signage was posted 2 days later. And the reason why that occurred was we did not receive the adjoining notices from DMD until the 22nd day prior to the hearing. So as soon as we received those notices, we sent them out immediately. So we would request that you do approve the waiver pursuant to the rules of procedure, which is similar to the previous petition. I think it's important that we have an understanding of the history of the project to know how we got to where we are this evening. And what I would like to do is I have a number of handouts. Take one and pass it down.
Okay, thanks.
Cruz Consulting was retained by Big Woods Brewery and Tim McGovern, who was the contractor on the project, in the middle of the summer of 2015. And upon them making that contact with Cruz Consulting, I was assigned the project, and I immediately referenced the appropriate zoning district for the development along this particular parcel. And that zoning district was the SZ1 district, which, as you know, is unique to Main Street development standards, and no other jurisdiction within Marion County has those particular development standards. The immediate goal for the development team was to have this particular restaurant up and operational prior to the 100th running of the Indy 500. And so this was a fast-track procedure from the get-go. And by time, the plan that you have there was the project that was initially approved for the development. And what that illustrates is the restaurant, along with the beer garden that extended north of the restaurant to the existing building there along Ford Street. Well, we were successful in having the restaurant operational prior to the running of the 500, and a lot of that credit needs to go to Kathleen with regard to her guidance and her expeditious review of the information that we submitted to her. The restaurant actually opened the week in which the Grand Prix race was ran, which was 3 weeks prior to the 500. During the immediate time in which the restaurant opened, the owners of Big Woods did an assessment as to the operations and whether or not parking was sufficient to serve their particular business model. And they came to determine that it was not. And probably towards the fall of last year, it would have been around September, Big Woods and McGovern came back to Cruz and asked what could possibly be done to reduce the size of the beer garden in order to allow additional parking. What I'm handing you now is the second plan that was approved, and what that illustrates is that the majority of the beer garden had been reduced, and that the plan provided 23 additional parking spaces. And we came before the boards and the administrators, and that particular layout was approved. Now, where this becomes a gray area, the issue tonight before you are two variances, and they both pertain to the height of fences that were a part of the second approval. And as I did with the initial approval, I went back to the SC1 zoning district to determine what the appropriate development standards were. what has happened was, after the approval of the initial development, the first plan I showed you, the city of Indianapolis adopted what they call the Unified Development Ordinance, and that went into effect April 6 of 2016. Big Woods came back to Cruise Consulting around June or August, it was in the fall of 2016, and we were unaware of the adaptation of the revised Unified Development Ordinance. And so I went to the SC1 zoning standards to determine what was appropriate for the development of this site. Now, where this really gets a little bit gray, the Unified Development Ordinance shows the SZ1 zoning district having an effective date of May 9th, 2016. So that's a month following the adoption of the Unified Development Ordinance. And in the SC1 zoning district, it has the same fencing standards. And those fencing standards in the SC1 zoning district has no height limitation. It only states that the fences must be of a material that is consistent with the exterior of the building or some other material as approved by the commission. And so we proceeded with the same development standards that we did with the initial improvement of the Big Woods Brewery. Now, the two issues that are before us this evening is that I think the simpler one, and I think Kathleen has stated also, is the fencing along Main Street and Ford Street. And the fencing limitation is 3 feet 6 inches. The fencing that we constructed relative to the second improvement was consistent with the fencing that was approved with the initial improvement, so that it had a uniform look. And that fencing is 4 foot tall. And so what I've just handed you are some pictures of the fencing, and these photos were taken August 17th of this past month. Now, the picture on page 1 is standing outside the beer garden that was retained, and it shows what they call a beer silo. And the beer silo is 8 feet tall, and that's just an illustration there. But what I'd like to focus on right now is the fencing on and along the street. The second photo shows you the wrought iron fence along Ford Street. The third photo is also the same, of the same area. Now, the last two photos are pictures of fencing that was previously approved, and they are 8 feet tall, and they're along Main Street. The first photo is the fencing that's south of the Foyt Winery, and the last picture is the fencing that's in front of the Praxair facility, and those both measure 8 feet. So I guess our point with this is that what we have constructed is not an egregious violation of the zoning ordinance, if in case there is indeed a violation for the citation. I think the bigger issue becomes this evening, as I've discussed with Kathleen, is the second fence which separates the parking lot from the beer garden. And that fence is 8 feet tall. And one of the reasons it's 8 feet tall, there are 2 steps internal to the beer garden that is 2 feet higher than the surface of the parking lot. And so in essence, to create a 6-foot buffer internal to the project, we need to have an 8-foot fence. And that's why that is there. Again, we did not do this in an effort to circumvent the ordinance and to come back and ask for forgiveness later. We were under the understanding that this was compliant with the ordinance, and the best records I have, and Kathleen may have something to the contrary, is that we have a drawing that was dated, I believe it is October 19th, that shows that fence being 8 foot tall on that plan. And I don't think the second approval was considered by the town until January of 2017. The hardship, in order for a variance to be granted, you have to satisfy 3 different criteria. And the first is that it will not be injurious to the public health, safety, and morals. We don't think the construction 8-foot fence falls within that. The second one is that it's not adversely affect the value of adjacent properties. We're of opinion it does not do that. The third one is that, does a strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance constitute an unusual and unnecessary hardship? Well, we believe that it does because the plans that were approved was what was constructed, and it's an existing condition. And Big Woods, I think the town looks at them as being a good neighbor and an asset to the local community. They took it upon themselves at their own expense to create the 23 parking spaces that the second project or the second approval created. Now, these 23 parking spaces was not only to the benefit of Big Woods, but it was a benefit to all the merchants, businesses, and restaurants on along Main Street, because it essentially freed up 23 additional parking spaces. And not only to that, I think it was mentioned in a previous petition that those who are visiting these businesses were using parking spaces that normally the residents use, so it was adversely affecting the residents. So we think that what Big Woods has done and come into the community and has provided is certainly an asset, and that, again, there was no intent to circumvent the ordinance if indeed there is a violation of the ordinance. Big Woods expended approximately $150,000 of their money to create this parking lot. And I think that shows what a good neighbor they are. And I would hope that, one other thing, let me state that the fence measures 8 feet tall. The height of the building is 28 feet, 10 and a half inches. So it does not dwarf the building. It's proportional and to scale with the building. And I think that's what some of those photos on the set pages 2 and 3 of what I handed out illustrates. I don't know if there's been any complaints registered with the town or the city, but I think that it is in accordance with the streetscape of Main Street when you established the SC1 zoning district. Thank you.
So, back at our original hearing for the parking lot and fencing, we did request that the fencing around the Main Street and Ford Street perimeter be of similar construction and materials as the existing fence. So, and we too were, unclear on the height requirement, or we would have accounted for that then. That's not the issue. The issue I have is the drawing I received with your submission to DMD for the variance indicates that the fence between the parking lot and the beer garden was to be a wrought iron type fence along that boundary. And those are the drawings the board reviewed and looked at prior to the hearing to help establish our ideas or thoughts on the project. At the hearing, you brought in a different set of drawings with similar details, similar type of symbols for fencing, but on it was changed to an 8-foot high wooden privacy fence. That was never mentioned to the board. That was never brought up in the hearing to us. And we don't have time to sit up here and review these drawings to the nth degree for changes such as that. So yes, did we approve this drawing from the original submission? Yes. Did we approve the drawing that you handed to us? Maybe by default, but not exactly. And that's the drawing that you submitted to the town for the permit based on our presumed approval. That's the drawing that was used to argue with our code enforcement officer when he came down to your site and told you, you cannot build an 8-foot high fence here, it's a 6-foot high maximum. Yet, you just using this other drawing and a presumed approval, you continued with the project. Even though it was suggested to you, it was wrong. So you can't come here and argue with us that you did everything right, and now we're trying to call you out on it.
I'm not arguing with anybody on that. The original, Mr. Chairman,
Why was there a change in the drawing that was not presented to us or mentioned to us at all during the hearing in January?
to my knowledge, the fence between the parking lot and the beer garden was never a wrought iron fence.
Would you like to see your drawing
Yeah, I would.
with your date stamp to the city of Indianapolis? And here's another one that was given to us as a packet. Wrought iron type fence. Date stamped October. When it was received by the city of Indianapolis with your submission for the variance request.
I'll be honest with you, I don't recall, I mean, I may have made that submittal, but I don't recall that being the intent, and I apologize to the board.
This isn't the first thing that's gone south on this project for us. And we called you out on that back in January, some of the unfulfilled commitments and promises for the parking lot, the design of the parking lot, the landscaping of it, the fencing around it. So this, you know, is this a bait and switch?
Absolutely not.
You know, why was there a change with no mention to the board or anybody else?
I don't know, or I cannot explain the annotation of that being a wrought iron fence. My understanding, that was never intent, and I apologize for that. It was to...
That's what was submitted, for the record.
Okay, I understand. I guess, well, during my discussions, let me say with Kathleen here recently, that issue never came up, and I was totally unaware of that. But getting down to what is to the benefit of the town, and I don't do the switch, that's not the way I do this. I've been doing this for 43 years. And once again, I will apologize to the board, but I think the product that you have that currently exists serves the best need for the intended use of the parking lot and creating a barrier similar to the previous petition. Again, I will apologize, and I will take it, but I think what you got there serves the project and the local community better than what was illustrated on that drawing, and I apologize for that. The intent was that when people were out there, they may have entertainment out there on the beer garden, it was be to create a barrier for the headlights and things of that nature. So, Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
A 6-foot fence wouldn't create an adequate barrier?
Well, our position was, again, that internal to the beer garden, there are steps up that are higher than the parking lot surface. And we wanted to create a barrier for those who were sitting in the upper level of the beer garden.
Well, I think 6-foot high fence is going to more than shield any headlights on today's cars. I'm still not understanding why it had to be 8 feet tall.
Well, again, it was our understanding.
So I believe it's taller than the concrete block wall that was originally between the alley and the beer garden.
Yeah, I don't know. It's close, I think. Jim, yeah, I don't know. But what we were doing, we were extending from that block wall over. So that's how we got to where we are. And again, it was never the intent to circumvent the ordinance or what was previously considered and approved. And when we were going through the ordinance, again, we went back to the Speedway zoning District 1, and we found no limitation to the height of fences. And there was no reference back to the UDI, or Unified Development Ordinance, that reference back limiting the height of the fence. So I apologize.
Any other questions for petitioner?
Not currently.
I have none.
Thank you, Mr. Sells. Do we have any remonstrators or proponents who wish to speak at this time? Kathleen.
I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Connie Harris again, and I know my address now. It's 5623 West 29th Place.
There you go.
So I've been there for a couple weeks. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the chamber again. I think that the building that Bigwood, I know nothing about the variance, and I understand you guys have a job to do, so I'm not speaking on if they did what they said they were going to do or not. I'm coming from the point that I think that as you drive into Speedway, the Big Woods building is such a great anchor for Main Street. It's a beautiful building. They're a great partner with the chamber and the community, Big Woods, and they employ a lot of our young people in Speedway. They recently donated pizzas for the football team. They're very involved in the community. And I have heard from residents where they actually like the way the fencing is because it's kind of buffers some of the band noise. I had heard before when the beer garden was bigger that there was some complaints of bands at night, and now with it being, I don't understand why, but with the fence being bigger and everything, that it kind of helps with a noise and blocking, maybe the beer garden from the street and that kind of thing. But I'm just speaking on behalf of Big Woods as being a good community partner, good for Main Street and good for our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ron Fisher, 2518 North Lyndhurst. When Big Woods first came to town, there was a private meeting we had, executive meeting in the SRC, and I actually opposed it, Jim, and because of some of the things. But so I said, I'm going to take it upon myself and go to Nashville. So I drove down to Nashville and spent a day. They didn't know who I was. Ordered a pizza, sat there, and they took me through where they made the beer and everything else. They didn't know who I was. And it was one of the men that worked for there. And then at the end of it, when I got ready to leave, I said, is the owners here? And they said, yeah, they were sitting right there. And it was Jim and Jeff. And we chatted that day. And all of a sudden, I was very impressed of Nashville, what they did there. Then I went over to Bloomington and looked at the facility there. I had no idea they were going to come to Speedway and bring Aspen to Speedway. And they have. They brought a $5 million investment to that corner. It produces a lot of tax dollars for us. And Saturday, a bunch of us tore down a garage for the town of Speedway. And we went over there to eat, and two of the guys never been there before. And they were so impressed. Unbeknownst to me, my wife was hosting some people from out of town there, and she was there again. And I'm so proud that I can take people from out of town over to Big Woods. One of the wealthiest men in town, I take him there, and he says, he owns a house in Aspen. And he says, boy, you brought Aspen to Speedway. Now, when we got 2 feet and difference of fence, and I looked at it, I love the security of the parking lot. I know why Allison's, I know why Praxair builds 8, 10-foot high fences. They have high security. But I appreciate the security of that parking lot's fence. But also the solid fence that they have, it's not in any way bad to the eye. And I hope that you forgive him, Mr. Chairman, but I've known Mr. Sells probably 43 years when he was at Mid-States Engineering, and he brings a lot of credibility and he's been a man of high reputation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else? Okay, Kathleen, you're up.
Chairperson Simonson, members of the board, as you will note from the staff report, staff is recommending approval of the decorative fence and the pillars around on Main Street and Ford Street, because that, again, feels that it's compatible with that area and it doesn't really have an impact on the surrounding land uses. The fence that staff has an issue with is that one that's interior to the site and is 8 feet tall. Staff mentioned that earlier that in order for a variance to be granted, you need to show a practical difficulty, and the fact that what they've explained tonight from staff's position does not create a practical difficulty. It just provides a barrier that is really uninviting and not pedestrian-oriented. I understand the reasons why they did that, but I don't think this is an appropriate application for an 8-foot tall fence. If this is approved tonight, staff would recommend that there be a commitment or a condition, however you want to handle that, that any future replacement or new installation of fences shall comply with the consolidated zoning and subdivision ordinance. And that, on this site, it would be 6 feet tall. But again, the staff believes that the fencing along Ford Street and Main Street is very appropriate, fits well with the character of the building and the Main Street. It's just that tall privacy fence that creates some issues for staff. And with that, staff would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
So a 6-foot fence would have no issues?
Correct.
Okay.
At least at this location. As you know, when you've got frontage,
Yes.
you're limited to 3.5.
The separation fence with internal to the property, it's
Right.
fine if it were 6 feet.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Kathleen?
I have none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I apologize. I don't know the date stamp of the drawing in your file. It does show that being a wrought iron fence. All I can tell you is I've got a drawing here. I don't know how they get submitted or reviewed, but it's dated 10/19 of 16, showing that being an 8-foot tall fence. The error, I apologize, it would be on my part. I think we look at this, the limitation of the height of fences per the ordinance is based on it being in a rear or side yard, which just does not appear to be within. And we do appreciate Kathleen's apparent willingness to work with us as a condition that if that fence were ever to be replaced, that would be replaced with a fence that's no taller than 6 feet. Again, I apologize. I've worked with Ron Fisher probably for 40 years, and I think he can give testimony that, we don't do it that way. And I would appreciate your support in approving the variance for the 8-foot tall fence, because it would be a substantial cost to be incurred by the petitioner, because this is just something where you just don't go in and cut the fence off 2 feet, call it 6 foot. I mean, it'd be a total replacement of that fence. So, again, I apologize. Big Woods is obviously a valued member of the community and a solid anchor for what was envisioned along the streetscape of Main Street. And hopefully we can get your willingness to approve the variance based on the condition that Kathleen brought to you with, if it was ever to be replaced, it would be with a 6-foot tall fence. Thank you.
So you're not willing to entertain reducing the fence height to 6 feet?
We would prefer that it stay at 8 feet for now. Again, we believe it's not in a rear or side yard, but we understand Kathleen's concern. To reduce it right now would be a substantial pecuniary penalty to Big Woods to replace that entire fence. So again,
I
we
don't
would,
see how the entire fence would have to be replaced to lower it 2 feet. The way it's constructed, it looks like the top cap pieces could be removed, the fence and poles cut down to appropriate heights, and the cap piece reattached.
I don't construct fences, but I would think that that would be very difficult to do and make it look as aesthetically as what we have there now. But you're the board, you make the decision, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We only have one ballot.
I think we should vote on the 2 fence issues separately. That's the other set of ballots over there.
That is, so what, this would be DVS 005. And then, I guess,
For the perimeter fence.
These are for the perimeter fence then?
The first vote we'll do is for the perimeter fence to be
The wrought iron?
the wrought iron fencing on Main Street and Ford Street.
so this will be for the variance of height.
Yes. Street.
should be for height. And then those are,
Our first vote is going to be for the wrought iron fence on the Main Street frontage and the Ford Street frontage. And our second ballot, our second vote is to allow for the 8-foot tall wooden privacy fence to remain as constructed.
Okay, the first ballot, 2017 DVS 005 for wrought iron fence is approved 4-0. Second ballot, DVS 005, variance of height is approved 3-1.
Is there any other business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, our next scheduled meeting is October 4th, 2017, 7 PM here at Town Hall. We are adjourned at 8:26.